nucleus down here. Okay? The bigger guy is the nucleus. Sometimes they get obstructed by the chloroplasts. But remember, in plant cells, the nucleus gets pushed off the side because the central vacuole is in the middle. You can't see it in these because it's transparent. Okay, so if you're going to take a photo, take it now.
Which one is it?
Is everyone good? Can I switch it? Yes.
Do we have to identify that this is in video or just...
No.
Okay.
What you will have to know that this is a plant cell. So it'll ask, what kingdom does this belong to? Okay? Okay, I'm switching. So, what phase of mitosis is this?
Telophase?
Telophase. Okay, you can take your pictures at any time. This is telophase. How do we know this is telophase?
It's the furrow.
Yeah, you can see the two separate cells. They aren't completely split, right? You can see the genetic material. Okay? This tells you that this is telophase or telophase, however you want to pronounce it. Are you guys okay for me to switch? Okay. So what kingdom does this organism belong to, and what organism is this?
It looks like
It is, yes. It's bacteria, and it is coccus. Okay? How do we know that this was coccus bacteria, Kimberly?
because there was no nucleus.
No nucleus, and she's absolutely correct. It's circular, and there's no nucleus, which means it's bacteria. Okay, bacteria, remember, are prokaryotes. They do not have a nucleus. And remember, you need to know the scientific shapes. So you need to know coccus is spherical, bacillus is rod, and spirilla is spiral. Okay, so those are three scientific terms you need to know for the midterm. Okay, is everyone all right if I switch? All right. What organism is this? It is a fungus. How, what is it? Yes, black bread mold, and what was the scientific name for that? This guy's rhizopus. Rhizopus. Okay, how do you know? Because of these big sporangia. Okay, all these strands here are the hyphae, and these circle-like balls are the sporangia. Okay. You guys okay if I switch this? Okay. So, is this a monocot or a dicot? Monocot. How do you know it's monocot? Parallel veins in the leaf. Okay. So remember, there's different ways to tell monocots from dicots. One of the ones you need to know are leaf veins, okay? So you need to be able to just be given a leaf like this, or an angiosperm plant that doesn't have flowers, and tell whether it's a monocot or a dicot. Okay? Is everyone all right if I switch this? Okay. So, what organism is this and what kingdom does it belong to? It's Euglena. Yes. Okay. So, we looked at two different preparations of Euglena, guys. Remember, we looked at the living, which are these three down here. And we looked at preserved, which were these guys over here. Okay, remember with Protista, we looked at a number of living and preserved specimens. Okay, so it's important to know them. You looked at them twice that day. Okay, remember Euglena is a plant-like or photosynthetic protist, but pretty much the only thing you can identify is the nucleus, especially in the preserved guys. So they have an oval-like shape for the most part. Okay, I included a bunch of magnifications because typically when they're living, this is what you saw up here. But if we have the ability, we could zoom in, and this is what your preserved guys look like. Are you guys okay if I switch? Okay. What organism is this? Penicillium. And what kingdom does penicillium belong to? Fungi. Good. Okay. So we have the hyphae. And then up here we have all the spores. So this guy looks a little bit like a plant, but is actually a fungus. Okay, so we looked at the slide of this, and then this is the one we also looked at in the Petri dish, and we looked at it eating the bacteria. Okay. You guys okay if I switch? All right. So what organism is this, and what kingdom does it belong to? Sorry? It's yeast. Okay? I didn't put up a preserved slide of yeast because we didn't look at one. This is living yeast, okay? How did you know that this was yeast and not coccus bacteria? Good. Okay? If you look, in some, you can make out the nucleus, and they have these thicker outer walls. Those are cell walls, right? Fungi are eukaryotes. They have a nucleus. They have the thick cell wall, okay? So these are your yeast cells, and right here we have a little bud going on, all right? So, like I said in lab, if you didn't remember, the two most common organisms that students mistake are coccus bacteria and the yeast. Okay, they're both microscopic and circular. So make sure you look for the presence of a nucleus. Okay? And the fungi or yeast cells are going to have this thick outer cell wall to them. Are you guys okay if I move to the next one? All right. Monocot or dicot? Great. Dicots. How did you know it was a dicot?
Four lines.
Flower parts of 4s or 5s.
And
Okay?
the nation B.
So this is an example of a flowering plant where just looking at the flowers, you have to be able to tell whether it's a monocot or a dicot. I like this yellow guy who's kind of funky looking down at the bottom. Are you guys okay if I switch? Does anybody need more time?
So,
Question?
Yeah, when you show the monocots, do monocots have flowers?
Yes, they do. We just haven't gotten there yet. I've mixed up the slides because it makes you think more, guys. If I put them in order by the labs, it wouldn't be as difficult. All right? All right, so what organism is this and what kingdom does it belong to? Sorry? Yeah, it's the diatoms, right? This was the really pretty slide where they all look like jewels. Okay? Remember, these were also part of the plant-like protists because they photosynthesize. So this one's pretty distinctive. We really didn't have a different slide that looked anything like this guy at all. Are you guys okay if I move on? Sheila, you okay over there? Okay. Okay, what phase of mitosis is this? What? Anaphase. Yes, how did we know it was anaphase?
Splitting.
It's starting to get pulled apart. Okay? So we're seeing some movement towards the opposite sides of the cell. Are you okay if I switch? All right. What organism is this? What is it?
Clonorchis.
Clonorchis. Okay, a lot of students know this because they did it for their bonus assignment. Okay, remember Clonorchis is also the fluke worm, so it's a type of flatworm. Okay, it belongs to the flatworms. Now, just as a side note, if you were to look at this, how would you know that this was a parasitic organism? Anyone? Most of its body is given towards reproduction, which is what all this stuff is. The uterus with the eggs. All this is testes down here. All right? That's not something you need to know. That was just to help you possibly identify it, all right? So this was one of the flatworms that we looked at. This guy, the common name for this guy is the fluke. All right, so this is the one we talked about that you find in your sushi. Is everyone okay if I move on? Yes.
Can you go back to the last picture, please?
The last image?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone's okay if I move on from this one? All right. So, what organism is this and what kingdom does it belong to? Bacteria, yes, Stephen, and what shape is it? It's the rod-like, so we need to know that rod is bacillus, yes. Okay? Rod-like. So don't get confused, guys, because some of these do look a little squiggly, but what you're actually looking at are the individual cells, right, which are rectangular. Okay, so this is your rod-like or bacillus bacteria. So this is one of those scientific terms you need to know. Bacillus is rod. Okay, you guys all right if I move on? Yeah. Bacteria is the kingdom. Bacteria is the kingdom. Okay, so is this a monocot or a dicot? Monocot. And how did we know it was a monocot?
3.
Multiples of 3. Multiples of 3. Okay, if I move on here? Okay. So, what organism is this? What kingdom does it belong to? Anyone? Sorry? It is a ciliate, absolutely. So what kingdom did the ciliates belong to? Protists, good. Do you guys know what organism this was? Paramecium. Very good. Paramecium. Good. Now, paramecium was one where we looked at the living organisms, which are on your right, transparent, and the preserved. Okay? Now, in the preserved, ours looked more like this guy where you could only see the macronucleus. And this one you can see the micronucleus. All right? So ours looked a little more like this and kind of like that. And then we saw a whole bunch of these with its own prep, and also when we did the pond and the hay infusion water, right? This is the most prevalent. So this is one of the animal-like protists, okay? Try not to get this confused with euglena, okay? The living ones you're not likely to do, but the preserved ones, they look somewhat similar, okay? Are you guys all okay if I move on here? All right. So what organism is this? Mosses. Good. So how do we know it's a moss, guys? Ah, good. Lecture students should know this, right? Sporophyte with the capsule. Okay, so this was the guy that you had in the little glass jar on your desks. Okay, every table had one in a little glass jar on their desks. And it was representative of this guy here and this guy here. And then I've included some mass examples of how they grow in your forests, okay? So this is your moss. All right, is everyone okay if I switch? Okay. What phase of mitosis is this? Metaphase. And how do we know it's metaphase? Yeah, it's right down the center of the cell, okay? It's probably the easiest phase aside from anaphase to recognize, okay? It's a favorite to put on the exam because it is easy to recognize. All right, so it's got the genetic material lined up in the middle of the cell. Meta means middle. Everybody's good if I switch? Okay, what is this? Conifers. Good. All right. Now, not all conifers have cones, remember? Or they may not be present How could you tell that this was a conifer? Okay, yes, it's got, some of them have cones, right? But they also have needles. And remember, the needles can be one of two forms. Okay? They can be the long, smooth, and pointy needles like in your pines, or the smaller, flat, and scaly needles like in your junipers. Okay? Yes?
Do we need to know that it's a gymnosperm or just conifer?
Conifer's fine. Is everyone okay if I switch this over? All right. Monocot or dicot? Monocot. And how'd you know that, Stephen? Ah, the scattered vascular bundles, okay? So remember you looked at those microscope slides, and I told you for the midterm, all you had to be able to do was identify whether they were a monocot or dicot, and the correct term was what, Stephen?
Or the
Scattered vascular bundles. Good. So see how they're all randomly placed here? Okay? All over the place. Okay, so the proper descriptive term is scattered vascular bundles. Are you guys all right if I switch? Okay. So, what organism is this, and what kingdom? Yes, it's Spirilla from the kingdom Bacteria. Okay? And these guys look like little fibers or little worms, however you want to describe them, but they have the wavy-like appearance.
It's solid, not individual.
Right, it's solid. You don't see individual cells. Thank you. That's a very good point. Okay? Are you guys all right if I move on here? Okay. What organism is this? Mm-hmm. It's a flatworm. Not a fluke. Planaria. This was planaria, yes. This one's a free-living flatworm. Okay? Planaria is easy to distinguish because it has this kind of triangular shaped head, and it has this big cavity in the middle. If you're going to confuse this with another worm, you're likely to confuse it with Planoarchus or the fluke. Alright? But you can tell it's not because it's got this triangular shaped head to it. Is it okay if I switch? Alright. So, what organism is this? What is special about it? Now, I don't expect you to remember the exact organism name, but can you tell me what kind of organism it is? Sorry? Oh, that's the special term, yes. So what did we see that was colonial? Sorry? Oh, it's not oscillatoria, but you're so super close. What was oscillatoria? Yes, it's colonial. Thank you, Ryan. It's bacteria. This guy was nostoc, okay? And it's special because it is colonial, all right? So remember, this guy is actually that spherical or coccus bacteria, right? It's got all these little circles. This is the one I told you guys looks like a strand of pearls, all right? It's got all these little circles in it, but it is colonial. So again, this is one of those ones, don't think it's Spirilla because these guys are kind of wavy. All right, you're looking at the individual cells. So it's unique because it is colonial. So it was one of the two colonials we looked at. Very good. You guys okay if I switch? All right. Monocot or dicot? Absolutely, it's a dicot. How'd you know? Yeah. So he's saying broken rings, which is the specific term that we use, right? Because it's herbaceous, not your tree. But they're in circles, and they have these little gaps in them. Okay? So both of these are dicots. Good, Amanda? Okay. You guys all right if I move on? Okay. What organism is this? What kingdom does it belong to? Yeah, it's a protist, and it's amoeba. Okay, so this is one of your animal-like protists. If you were lucky, you found a living amoeba, which are these guys here. Remember, they were transparent. They don't have a distinctive shape. They're kind of blob-like. All right? And we looked at the preserved amoebas where you can actually see the nucleus, all right? So these guys don't have a distinctive shape. They're kind of jelly-like blobs, right? What are these extensions called here? Anyone remember that? Pseudopods. Yes, pseudopods. Okay? And the reason, remember, when we looked at Protista, I warned you guys that the ones that we look at, both living specimens or preserved specimens, are the ones you want to pay special attention to, because we looked at them twice. It kind of means they're a little bit more important, all right? So is everyone okay if I move on to this next one? All right? So, what organism is this, and what's special about it? Sorry, I can't hear you. It's a colony. Yes, it's colonial, but it does not start with a V. What kind of kingdom is this? No. It's bacteria, and it's colonial. This was the Bacillus colonial we looked at. Anyone remember it? Oscillatoria. Thank you. Yes, this is the other colonial that we looked at. Okay, so even though these are squiggly, it's not spirilla, right? We're looking at these individual cells in here, which are rod-like. So this was the rod-like or Bacillus colonial organism. Okay, and it's green because it's a photosynthetic bacteria. Can I switch? All right. So what phase of mitosis is this? Prophase. And how'd you know it was prophase?
It's still single. No, it's starting to condense.
It's starting to condense, yes.
And there's no
Ah, no nuclear